Imagine a moment of absolute silence when you are alone with your thoughts. In this peaceful environment, a strange and unexpected question suddenly arises. What if you just disappear? This phenomenon is known as the call of the void, a phenomenon that is both mesmerizing and baffling in nature. It arises like a whisper from the abyss, an echo from the depths of our consciousness. Paradoxically, these impulses, which contradict the very instinct of self-preservation, most often appear in moments of deep self-reflection and awareness. It is important to note that this impulse should not be confused with the urge to die. Rather, it is a sharp reminder of the limitlessness of our freedom of choice and, at the same time, the fragility of human existence. Imagine yourself standing on the edge of a precipice. Suddenly, there is a strange urge to take a step forward. However, this is not a true desire to fall, but rather a realization that the ability to take that step is entirely within your control. Psychologists and philosophers have been debating this mysterious phenomenon for years. Some believe that the call of the void reflects a subconscious attempt to test the boundaries of what is permissible in our relationship to life and death. Other thinkers, such as Albert Camus, see it as an inevitable encounter with the absurd, the gulf between the human quest for meaning and the seeming indifference of the universe. However, what if the phenomenon of the call of the void is more than a mere spawn of the depths of the human subconscious? What if it is a unique opportunity to look into the innermost corners of oneself and to question the true aspirations and desires that define one's life path? Consider, for example, a situation when a person drives a car at night on a deserted road. Monotonous hum of the engine, beams of headlights cutting through the darkness, and suddenly the thought arises in the mind, what if we turn the steering wheel sharply to the side? It is important to note that such a fleeting urge is not at all indicative of suicidal tendencies. Rather, it is a manifestation of a collision with the realization of one's own free will. At this moment, a person feels the full weight of human existence, the boundless freedom of choice, and, at the same time, the enormous responsibility that is inextricably linked to this freedom. It is here that one begins to realize that the call of the void is not just a psychological phenomenon, but a kind of portal that opens access to larger philosophical reflections. It makes one think about fundamental questions. What does it mean to be alive, to control one's destiny, and at the same time to face inevitable uncertainty? When such thoughts arise, there is a dilemma: to ignore them or to try to understand what message they carry. However, the emptiness is only a starting point, a kind of springboard that opens the way to even deeper questions. To successfully navigate this complex labyrinth, it is necessary to understand how human beings are able to create meaning and order in the midst of chaos and uncertainty. This is where the concept of the absurd comes into play, which will be the starting point for further considerations. Because in order to challenge the void, one must realize what it is that one is struggling with. All people are united by an unquenchable thirst for meaning, the desire to find answers to the fundamental questions of existence. Human beings spend their lives trying to build cause and effect relationships, to create convincing stories, and to find a rational grain in every event, in every fleeting moment. But what if, at its very core, life lacks any higher purpose? This question lies at the heart of the philosophical musings of Albert Camus, who saw human existence as an ongoing struggle with the absurd. According to Camus, the absurd arises from the clash between man's irrepressible quest for meaning and an indifferent, mute universe incapable of providing answers. Camus draws a parallel between human existence and the myth of Sisyphus, the hero of Greek mythology, condemned to a meaningless and endless labor, to roll a huge stone to the top of a mountain forever, only to watch it roll down again and again. There is no triumph, no ultimate goal, just an endless, monotonous cycle. However, according to Camus, the greatness of this myth lies in the moment when Sisyphus accepts his fate. It is in this act of acceptance that he finds true freedom. Albert Camus once proclaimed, "Sisyphus should be imagined happy." But what does this profound thought mean for ordinary people, for those who daily face their own stones, the routines and challenges of life? This statement does not call for mindless optimism at all, but rather indicates that the endless search for objective meaning may lead to exhaustion, but it is not a reason for despair. The absurdity of human existence, according to Camus, is not a verdict, but rather an invitation to rebellion, a chance to create one's own unique meaning. It is a call to challenge the universe, which offers no ready answers, and to make choices that will infuse life with value. If the universe does not offer us a purpose, why not create it ourselves? Consider a simple but telling example. An artist working passionately on his work, not knowing if anyone will see it or recognize it. For this artist, the very act of creation becomes a response to the absurdity of existence. He creates not in anticipation of applause, but because this process fills his existence with meaning and purpose. This begs the question, what would each of us do if we knew that our efforts would never be noticed or understood? Would this activity retain its value? Camus encourages finding joy and fulfillment in the very process of living, even if there are no guarantees of success or recognition. It is important to appreciate each moment, each action, giving them personal meaning and content. The author encourages us to change the angle of view on our own life, to refuse to see it as a complex puzzle that requires an immediate solution, and instead to see it as a unique adventure full of unique moments that are worth living in their entirety. When a sense of emptiness creeps into our souls, perhaps it is nothing more than a silent question to ourselves. How do we intend to fill the time allotted to us? And as we ponder this question, we may be surprised to discover that the true meaning of life lies in the act of choice itself. However, the French philosopher and writer Albert Camus leaves unanswered one of the key questions. What are the origins of this freedom of choice? Is it an integral part of our existence, given to us from birth? Or is it merely a clever illusion designed to soften the harshness of existence and bring comfort to our troubled souls? It is at this point that the Danish thinker Søren Kierkegaard enters the philosophical debate, offering a very different perspective that goes beyond the concept of the absurd. He proposes to focus on the paradoxical nature of freedom and how our choices affect our lives. And it is to this concept that we will now turn. Freedom, a priceless gift or a heavy burden? Kierkegaard, one of the founders of existentialism, argued that freedom is both the greatest gift we possess and an inexhaustible source of suffering. For him, the call of the void is not simply an encounter with the absurd, but a reflection of the enormous weight that freedom imposes on us. When we find ourselves on the edge of the abyss, we realize with particular acuity the enormous responsibility that rests on our shoulders, because we are free to choose even our own end. But freedom is not absolute and unconditional. Søren Kierkegaard, the eminent Danish philosopher, described this state as the vertigo of freedom. This specific feeling arises when a person is confronted with a limitless horizon of possibilities and realizes that every choice made inevitably entails the rejection of all alternative paths. With free will, people are at the same time captive to the consequences of their decisions. The void thus appears as a ruthless mirror, reflecting not only the current essence of the human being, but also potential versions of the self that could exist under a different choice. Let us imagine the image of a man standing in front of an open door, realizing that he is free to enter it at any moment. This door symbolizes the totality of all available options for the development of events. But at the same time, it poses the need to make a decision. Will he dare to enter? And if so, is he ready to face what awaits him on the other side of the threshold? The call of the void is, in fact, this very door. It does not impose, does not force, but is simply present, offering a choice. But why does this offer of choice cause a person so much mental torment? Kierkegaard argued that at its core, the call of the void represents a profound spiritual crisis. It reveals the fundamental contradiction tearing at the human soul, the conflict between the natural desire for security and the equally strong desire for transcendence, for transcending the ordinary and finite. Faced with the concept of absolute freedom, man involuntarily begins to question not only the correctness of his own decisions, but also the very essence of his independence, wondering whether he is not a puppet in the hands of inscrutable forces. What is more terrifying, the thought of predetermination of every step, or the realization of full responsibility for one's own fate? This paradox is reflected in everyday situations, when an individual is faced with a difficult choice, for example, to give up a secure job for the realization of his dreams. What outweighs the fear of failure or the desire for freedom to test one's strength? Søren Kierkegaard would argue that it is in such moments that one experiences what he called despair, but not ordinary despair, but existential despair, when faced with emptiness and the fundamental question, how to dispose of one's freedom. In Kierkegaard's view, the way out lies in what he labeled as the leap of faith, not a blind and reckless step, but a deep conviction that beyond this emptiness, there is something that gives meaning to every choice. The philosopher calls for embracing uncertainty and acting even without any guarantees, arguing that this is where true freedom lies, not in the absence of fear, but in the courage to move forward in spite of it. But what happens when, despite one's best efforts and steps taken, one is still faced with painful experiences and suffering? How can one continue one's life journey when existence seems to be an unbearable burden? At such times, it is worth turning to the philosophical teachings of the Stoics, who argue that sometimes life itself becomes the greatest manifestation of courage. This is what we will talk about next. Situations are encountered where the burdens of life become inordinately heavy. Pain, whether physical or emotional, exerts a tremendous pressure comparable to climbing an endless mountain. It is at such critical moments that the courage to simply go on living becomes one of the most significant manifestations of human fortitude. Seneca, the eminent Stoic philosopher, realized this more than anyone else. He was of the opinion that at certain moments, the mere continuation of life is already an act of heroism. Seneca had first-hand knowledge of pain and suffering. In his writings, he spoke openly about his own struggle with hardships, recognizing that continued existence seemed an impossible task. One day, plagued by illness, he seriously considered ending his life, but in that dark hour, he realized something more. He wondered what effect his passing would have on those who loved and valued him. The hero realized that his unbearable suffering is only part of a bigger picture, where his choices can transform the fates of others. This is the true essence of human resilience, not just enduring pain, but realizing that every decision leaves a mark on the lives of others. Imagine the surface of a lake disturbed by a thrown stone. Circles spread across the water, reaching the farthest shores. Likewise, our decisions create ripples that impact those around us. Have you ever thought about how your presence, your steadfastness, can be a source of inspiration and strength for others? Seneca, however, does not urge us to ignore pain or pretend it doesn't exist. On the contrary, he suggests that we bravely face reality and find purpose, even in the bleakest of circumstances. For him, pain is not the enemy. The real enemy is the refusal to search for meaning and interconnectedness when suffering seems unbearable. Imagine an individual faced with the challenge of her determination on a daily basis. Each new day is a battlefield for her, where she not only displays personal courage as she takes the fight, but also becomes an inspiration to others. Her actions serve as a reminder of the enduring value of resilience and the need to move forward, even when the road seems impassable. This Stoic view of life forces us to rethink the very notion of suffering. Should pain be viewed solely as something to be avoided at all costs? Or can it be a powerful stimulus for personal growth and strengthened connections with the world around us? Seneca teaches that living courageously does not mean denying the existence of emptiness, but rather accepting it as a given and finding the inner reserves to move forward, even when the future is uncertain. Perhaps this is the ultimate answer to the call of the void, not to flee from it, but to recognize it as an integral part of the experience of life. After all, identity is formed not only in moments of joy and triumph, but also in the process of overcoming doubts and fears. By accepting this, one gains not only courage, but also a clear understanding of one's purpose. And so, when this reflection comes to an end, the question naturally arises: how will you answer the call of the void? It is worth thinking about what to do in this situation: to accept the challenge openly, seeing it as a chance for personal development and strengthening relationships, or to retreat, perceiving what is happening as an undesirable danger. The choice is up to the person, and it depends on him whether the obstacle will become a stepping stone to new heights or an insurmountable obstacle.